Welcome to the Pro Ticker Deep Dive.
It is fantastic to be here.
Today is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. And I have to be honest, looking at this pile of documents in front of me, executive orders, corporate filings, trade manifestos, it all feels a bit heavy today. It feels different.
Heavy is a good word for it. Yeah, or maybe significant.
Yeah, significant. It feels like we're living through one of those moments in history where you can actually feel the tectonic plates shifting under your feet. Sometimes history just kind of happens quietly in the background. But right now, it feels loud.
It is incredibly loud. And if you listen to the buzzwords floating around in the corridors of power right now, I mean, from Washington to Beijing to Brussels, there's one phrase that just keeps coming up.
Which one is that?
The Great Divergence.
The Great Divergence. Wow. That sounds like a chapter title in a history book that hasn't even been written yet. It sounds a little ominous, but also, I don't know, kind of electrifying, like we're splitting off into a new timeline.
And in so many ways we are. I mean, we are witnessing this fundamental split in the global operating system. On one side, you have this absolutely breakneck acceleration of technology. Specifically, you have digital intelligence finally getting a physical body.
It's not just code anymore.
Exactly. It's no longer just code. It's kinetic. It's real.
Wow.
And then on the other side of that divergence, you have this geopolitical reality where national borders are, they're turning into hard firewalls for technology.
Yeah.
The whole idea of a seamless, flat world globalization.
It's over.
It's effectively over. It's being replaced by this really intense, almost, desperate drive for national sovereignty.
It really, really feels that way. I was thinking back to, 2024, 2025?
Yeah.
We all got so used to AI living on our screens.
Mm-hmm.
It wrote our emails. It made those weird pictures of, astronauts riding horses on the moon. It helped debug code. It was digital. It was safe, behind the glass.
Right.
But looking at the news from just this week, 2026 is really shaping up to be the year that AI puts on a pair of work boots, grabs a hard hat, and actually starts doing physical labor and, hard science.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The digital is becoming physical, and that transition is expensive. It's potentially dangerous, and it's forcing governments to get involved in ways we really haven't seen since the space race.
Or the Manhattan Project.
For the Manhattan Project, exactly.
So to help everyone listening navigate this new reality, and there is a lot to navigate, we've broken today's deep dive into three main pillars. We kind of need to structure this so we don't get lost in all the noise.
Good plan. It's easy to get lost.
First, we're going to talk about something called the Genesis mission.
Which is a massive, and I mean a massive shift in how the U.S. government views artificial intelligence. We are moving from a hands-off regulatory approach to a hands-on nationalization of direction.
Direction, not control.
Exactly. It's no longer just a market product. It's being treated as a national asset for scientific discovery.
Then, we're going to get into that work boots aspect I mentioned, embodied AI, specifically the explosion of humanoid robots. We have to talk about a company called Aptronic that is just making huge waves and the intense competition that's brewing with China. And I want to get into the nuts and bolts of this. Is it real or is it just another cool demo video?
Oh, it is very real. And the economics behind it are, frankly, shocking.
And finally, we have to talk about the walls. The walls that are going up, trade war 2.0, we're talking tariffs, these Section 232 investigations, and how all this trade policy is reshaping everything from the semiconductors in your phone to the private jets flying over the border.
It's a lot to cover.
It is a packed agenda. Let's dive in. Let's start with this Genesis mission. When I first saw that headline, Genesis mission, I honestly thought it was the title of a new sci-fi movie.
It sounds like one, doesn't it?
It has that ring to it. But this is real government policy, isn't it?
It is very real, and that name is entirely intentional. Genesis implies a beginning, a creation event. The Genesis mission is basically the U.S. government nationalizing the direction, not the ownership, but the direction of AI development.
And the goal is what exactly?
The goal is to supercharge scientific discovery. It was launched late last year, late 2025, but it's only now that we're seeing the rubber really hit the road.
Okay, so what does that actually look like in practice? Is it just the government buying a bunch of enterprise ChatGPT subscriptions for every scientist in the country and saying, hey, go ask it how to cure cancer?
No, and that's a really crucial distinction to make here. You see, the AI models that we've all gotten used to, like GPT-4, Claude, Gemini, they're large language models, LLMs.
Right.
Their training data is the internet. They're trained on Reddit threads, Wikipedia articles, fan fiction, news reports, you name it. They are optimized to sound convincing to a human being.
Right. They're basically autocomplete on steroids.
Yeah.
They're masters of grammar and prose.
That's it exactly. If you ask a standard LLM to write a poem about, say, a sunset, it gives you a fantastic poem. But if you ask it to design a new battery electrolyte or a new protein structure for a drug,
It might just make something up.
it might hallucinate a molecule that completely violates the laws of thermodynamics. It doesn't actually know physics. It knows patterns and language about physics.
It knows what a molecule is supposed to look like on paper, but not whether it will actually, work or just explode in the lab.
Precisely. And that is the exact gap the Genesis mission is designed to fill. This is an initiative being led by the Department of Energy, the DOE. They've launched something called the Genesis Mission Consortium.
A consortium. So it's not just the government.
No, it's public-private. The core idea is that commercial AI is great for language, but the market just wasn't building AI that was optimized for physics or material science or biology fast enough.
And why not?
Because the training data isn't on the public internet. You can't scrape it. It's locked away in university and national labs. It's raw, experimental, data crystallography, genomics, particle accelerator outputs, data that is incredibly valuable and incredibly messy.
So the government is basically unlocking its treasure chest of data and building an AI to understand it.
That's it. The Genesis mission is funding the creation of what they're calling a fully open suite of advanced AI models, built specifically for the scientific community. They're trying to build an AI that doesn't just speak English, but one that speaks the language of reality.
An AI that speaks reality. That is a fascinating concept. And this isn't just a white paper, right? We're actually seeing this stuff in the wild already.
We are. The National Science Foundation and the DOE have been pumping serious money into this, and it has already produced some incredibly high-performance open-source models. The big one right now is called Olmo 3.
I saw that name pop up in the documents, Olmo 3. Why is that specific model so important? Why should you, the listener, care about something called Olmo 3?
Well, the significance of a model like Olmo 3 is that it's open source. And it's powerful. Think about the massive barrier to entry that existed before this.
Okay.
If you were a small biotech startup in Boston or maybe a materials science firm in Austin trying to invent a better solar panel, you had two really bad options. Option one, you pay a massive licensing fee to a big tech giant for a general purpose model that might not even be very good at science.
And it's probably a black box. You don't know how it works.
Exactly. Or option two, you try to train your own model from scratch, which costs tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in compute power that you just don't have.
Which is impossible for a startup, so you're stuck.
You're completely stuck. Now, the government is stepping in and saying, here is Olmo 3. It's incredibly powerful. It understands scientific principles. It's been trained on the highest quality DOE data, and it is free for you to use. Go invent something.
That is a complete game changer for small businesses. It feels like it levels the playing field. It democratizes access to the smartest scientists in the room.
It really does.
But, and there's always a but, when the government gets this involved. I was reading through the new AI action plan that the administration released just this week. And the tone of it, well, it's aggressive. It doesn't sound like a friendly, collaborative science fair.
Aggressive is the right word. The language has shifted dramatically. It's no longer about participation in the global AI ecosystem. It's about dominance. And part of that strategy involves a very, very controversial ideological pivot.
Yeah, this part really jumped out at me, and I want to spend a second here because it feels really significant. The action plan directs the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's NIST, to revise their AI risk management frameworks. These are basically the safety rules, right?
Correct. These are the guidelines that determine what makes an AI model safe or trustworthy for government use and, by extension, for the broader industry.
And they are not just tweaking the margins here. The document explicitly directs them to remove references to things like misinformation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, and even climate change.
It is a huge departure, a complete 180-degree turn from the policies we saw taking shape in 2024 and 2025.
So what's the new directive? What's replacing those concepts?
The new directive is that the government will only contract with frontier LLM developers who can ensure their systems are objective and free from top-down ideological bias.
Objective and free from ideological bias. Hold on, though. That sounds great in a press release, but let's be real for a second. If you train an AI on historical data, and that history contains centuries of human bias, the AI is going to reproduce it. How does the government plan to magically scrub bias without just introducing a different kind of bias? Isn't objective just a code word for the bias that we prefer?
You have hit the nail on the head. That is the billion-dollar question, and it's the core of the controversy. The administration's argument, and I'm just reporting their stated position here, is that the previous frameworks were actively hampering American innovation.
How so?
They argue that forcing AI models to conform to specific social or political goals was acting like a drag chute. The safety rails, specifically the kind of reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, that was used to prevent misinformation or enforce DEI standards. They believe it slowed the models down.
So the AI was spending too many cycles worrying about being offensive.
That's the argument, that the model was constantly second-guessing itself. Am I allowed to say this? Does this answer align with this framework? And that this process made them less capable of raw, unfiltered reasoning.
So the argument is, strip the safety rails off the rocket so it can fly faster and further and just hope it doesn't crash.
Precisely. The new directive is all about speed and capability. They view this as a prerequisite for achieving U.S. AI supremacy to compete with adversaries, primarily China. The belief in Washington is that China isn't slowing down for these kinds of social considerations, so neither can we.
It's a full-on speed run. But it really does make you wonder, look, if we're just using these objective models for pure science, maybe it's fine. I don't need a solar panel to be politically correct. I just need it to be efficient.
Right.
But what happens when these models bleed back into social applications? When they're used for things like loan applications or hiring or criminal justice? That's where it gets incredibly messy.
It gets very, very messy. But the administration seems to have made the calculation that that is a risk they are willing to take to win the race.
And you can see that same sense of urgency in how they're approaching the physical world, too. The action plan explicitly acknowledges that AI is the first digital service that is challenging America to build vastly greater energy generation.
We've talked about the energy demands of AI before, but this language sounds different. This sounds like they're panicked.
I think they're treating it as a national emergency. The report itself notes that American energy capacity has been largely stagnant since the 1970s. We just haven't built big things in decades.
Meanwhile, China
China has been building out its grid at a truly breakneck pace. The administration now views fixing our grid not just as an infrastructure project, but as a core component of national security. It's a prerequisite for winning the AI war.
You can't run a Genesis mission if you can't turn the lights on in the data center. It's that simple.
It's fascinating how AI has gone from being a software problem to a hardware problem, and now to a raw energy and physics problem. The cloud is finally getting heavy.
And heavy things need bodies.
Exactly. And speaking of bodies, let's pivot to our second pillar, embodied AI. Because if the Genesis mission is creating the brain, this next part is definitely building the body.
This is where we see that transition from the screen to the factory floor to the warehouse to the real world. Embodied AI is a term you are going to be hearing a lot more of in 2026.
So define that for us. How is it different from just a regular robot? I mean, we've had robots in factories for 40 years. They paint cars, they weld things. What's new?
So a traditional robot in a factory is automated, not autonomous. That is the absolute key difference.
Automated, not autonomous.
Okay. It follows a very rigid script. Move arm left 30 degrees, weld spot X, move arm right 30 degrees. It's essentially blind and dumb. If you move the car part 3 inches to the left, the robot fails. It might just keep welding empty air because that's what the script says to do.
Right. It has no awareness.
Zero awareness. Embodied AI means the robot has a system that allows it to perceive the world around it, reason about what it perceives, and then act on that reasoning. It's not following a script. It's actively solving a problem in real time.
It can see and understand its environment.
Correct. And to do that, we're seeing a technological shift from the large language models, LLMs, to what are now being called VLAs, Vision Language Action Models.
VLA, Vision Language Action. That sounds complicated. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Think of it as a 3-step cognitive process for the robot. First, there's vision. The robot uses its cameras and sensors to see the world, just like our eyes. It recognizes objects. That is a box, that is a table, that is a human.
Okay, so it identifies things.
Then comes language. It maps those visual objects to abstract concepts. It understands that a box is for holding things, and it can understand a spoken or typed command like, please pick up the box and put it on the table.
So it connects the image to the meaning.
Precisely. And finally, the third step is action. It translates that understanding into physical motor control. It plots a path, calculates the grip strength needed, and executes the task. To put the box on the table, I need to walk 3 feet, bend my knees, grasp the box with X amount of force, stand up, and place it down.
Okay, so it's connecting the dots from seeing to doing.
Right. And the latest tech stacks are even more advanced. Take the Gemini Robotics 1.5 stack that's being licensed out. It combines a VLA model with something called an ER model.
ER.
Embodied reasoning.
Embodied reasoning. Give me a real-world example of that. Because I have to say, my little Roomba vacuum gets stuck on the fringe of my area rug 3 times a week and just boops pathetically for help. The idea of a 5'8" humanoid robot trying to decide if my coffee cup is trash or a treasured heirloom, that gives me a little bit of anxiety.
That's a very valid fear, and that is exactly the problem that embodied reasoning is trying to solve. Let's stick with your room example. Imagine you tell a robot, clean this room. A traditional robot would need a pre-programmed path. A simple VLA might be able to recognize the obvious trash on the floor,
Okay.
but the embodied reasoning model helps it plan and make judgment calls in ambiguous situations. It thinks in a sequence, like a human would. Okay, I see a cup on the table. Is it trash? No, it still has coffee in it. I shouldn't throw that away. But that crumpled piece of paper on the floor is trash. I should pick that up first. Then I need to move that chair out of the way so I can sweep underneath it.
So it's not just executing one command. It's creating a complex, multi-step plan on the fly. It's dealing with ambiguity.
Exactly. It's the difference between a train that can only run on tracks and a true off-road vehicle that can navigate any terrain. It's a massive leap in capability.
And there is one company that seems to be the absolute poster child for this right now, Aptronic.
Aptronic is the player to watch. They just closed a massive Series A funding round over $520 million.
$520 million. For a Series A, that number is just insane. A typical, big Series A is what, 10 million? Maybe 20 million if you're a hot startup?
Exactly. This is an order of magnitude larger. It's astronomical. And what it does is it immediately values the company at $5 billion. It shows that the big money investors are betting that this is not science fiction anymore. They believe the technology is ready to scale right now.
And their flagship robot is called Apollo, right?
Yes, Apollo. It's a humanoid robot, stands about 5'8". And crucially, this is not just another slick concept video of a robot dancing or doing a backflip.
That's the key for me.
It is. Apollo is currently being tested in real-world factories with major companies like Mercedes-Benz and GXO Logistics.
It's in the Mercedes factory, on the line, doing actual work. But let's talk about the money, because this is where my jaw really hit the floor. I was reading about their future pricing strategy. By 2027, they expect to be able to deliver these robots for approximately $80,000 each.
Think about the economics of that for a second.
I am. And honestly, my first reaction is skepticism. $80,000. That is the price of a loaded Ford F-150. For a humanoid robot that can work in a factory. How is that even possible?
I know, it sounds aggressive, but let's just do the quick back-of-the-napkin math on that $80,000 figure, because that is the number that scares labor unions and excites Wall Street.
Okay, let's do it.
If you amortize that $80,000 purchase price over, say, a 5-year lifespan, you're looking at roughly $16,000 a year in capital costs.
All right.
Now let's be generous and add another $10,000 a year for maintenance, software updates, and electricity. So now you're at $26,000 annually.
$26,000 a year for a worker that doesn't sleep.
Doesn't sleep, doesn't take bathroom breaks, doesn't need health insurance, doesn't fall for workers' comp, and can work double or even triple shifts. 247.
Okay, so compare that to a human worker.
A human warehouse worker in the U.S. today, when you factor in wages, payroll taxes, insurance, benefits, the fully loaded cost to the employer is easily $60,000 to $80,000 a year. And that's for a single 8-hour shift.
Wow.
If the Apollo robot works 2 shifts, it's replacing, what, $140,000 of human labor for a cost of $26,000 a year. The arbitrage there is just massive. It's undeniable.
That is the scary math. It's really hard to argue with those numbers. But getting to that $80,000 price tag assumes they can mass produce them like cars. Right now, these things are basically hand-built prototypes that must cost millions apiece. How do they cross that valley of death from prototype to mass production?
That is the billion-dollar challenge. Morgan Stanley is already anticipating over $1 billion in pre-order demand. If that materializes, it would give Aptronic the volume they need to really drive down the component and manufacturing costs. But you're right, it is a chicken and egg problem. You need the high volume to get the low price, but you need the low price to generate the high volume.
And then while they're trying to figure that out, the competition is not sleeping. This isn't just a rivalry between a few startups anymore. It's nations competing. We have to talk about China.
China. The Great Divergence Report and other geopolitical analyses from the White House are explicitly worried about China's manufacturing lead here. They see it as an existential threat.
So what are they doing about it?
China is essentially building a humanoid robot industry from scratch, almost overnight. They're concentrating this effort in Beijing in a special economic cluster called Yizhuang.
Yizhuang, I haven't heard of it. Is this like their version of Silicon Valley?
It's more like their Detroit meets Silicon Valley with massive government backing. It's huge. There are over 300 robotics companies already clustered there, and the Chinese government is just pouring resources into it.
And are they just copying the U.S. model?
Not entirely. What's fascinating is their business model. They aren't just focusing on selling robots. They are moving very aggressively towards a robot rental model.
Robot rental. You mean like Hertz, but for humanoid workers?
Yes, exactly that. Instead of a factory having to make a huge capital investment to buy a fleet of robots and take on all that risk, they can just rent them by the hour or by the task.
That dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for smaller companies.
Significantly. China is moving from using robots as, gimmicks in restaurants to making them core economic engines. And this rental model allows them to scale adoption much, much faster.
That sounds like they are trying to outmaneuver us on the business side, not just the tech side.
That is the big fear in Washington. If China comes to dominate the hardware of the future workforce, the physical bodies that the AI will inhabit, that is a massive strategic disadvantage for the U.S. and its allies. Hence the urgency of the Genesis mission, hence the huge investment in companies like Aptronic.
It really is a space race.
It is the defining space race of our time. And there are other major players in the U.S. too. We've talked about Aptronic, but Figure AI is also huge. And of course, there's Tesla's Optimus project lurking in the background.
All this brings up a really interesting question about labor. We always jump to the idea of robots replacing humans. But I saw a comparison in our notes to a different kind of AI company, one called Suno, the AI music generator.
Yes, that's a fascinating parallel to draw. Suno AI is now valued at over $2.45 billion. And the argument for that valuation is that Suno didn't destroy musicians. It actually enabled more people to create music.
Right.
It lowered the barrier to entry for creativity.
Right. It gave a tool to people who had a melody in their head but couldn't play an instrument.
Exactly. So the big question is, will robots like Apollo follow that same path?
Is Apollo going to take the job? Or is it going to be a tool that helps the human worker do more or do a different, better job?
The public narrative is certainly shifting, at least from the companies and the government. It's moving away from replacement and toward tackling labor shortages.
Especially in sectors like defense and manufacturing.
Right, where we simply don't have enough skilled bodies to do the work. The sales pitch is that the robots will fill the dangerous, dirty, and dull jobs, which allows the humans to move up the value chain to do higher-level oversight and problem solving.
That's the pitch. But let's be honest. Corporations are driven by the bottom line. Whether that augmentation argument holds true when the robot costs $80,000 and the human costs $100,000 a year, that remains to be seen.
It very much remains to be seen.
And speaking of scary math and economic barriers, let's move to Section 3, the geopolitical trade war. Because if we are building these advanced robots and these super powerful AI chips, it seems like we are simultaneously putting up some very, very high walls around them.
We are seeing the return of tariffs and protectionism as a primary tool of statecraft, and specifically the aggressive use of Section 232 investigations.
Let's unpack that term, Section 232. I hear that number thrown around on financial news all the time, but what does it actually mean? Is it a new law?
No, and that's what makes it so potent. The context is crucial. To understand Section 232, you have to go all the way back to 1962, the Trade Expansion Act.
1962, so the height of the Cold War.
Exactly. The world was terrified of nuclear war. Congress gave the president the power to unilaterally restrict imports if an investigation found that those imports threatened to impair national security. The classic example was steel.
Right. You can't rely on foreign steel because if you go to war, you won't be able to build tanks and ships.
Precisely. It was a break glass in case of emergency clause for trade policy. And for decades, it basically gathered dust on a shelf.
It was the nuclear option of trade.
In a way, yes. It allows the executive branch to bypass a lot of the usual congressional hurdles and international trade agreements. But now, in 2026, the administration is effectively arguing that everything is a tank.
Everything is a national security issue.
Everything. Semiconductors are tanks, wind turbines are tanks, the pharmaceuticals in your cabinet are tanks. They are stretching the definition of national security to cover the entire high-tech economy.
It's a total reimagining of how the American economy should interact with the rest of the world.
Absolutely. The administration has initiated Section 232 investigations into robotics, industrial machinery, wind turbines, polysilicon for solar panels, pharmaceuticals, commercial aircraft. The list is extensive and growing.
It seems like they're targeting the exact industries that are critical for this new AI-driven economy we've been talking about.
Mm.
Robotics, energy, tech.
It is a very coordinated, two-pronged strategy. You use one hand to build up the domestic industry, like with the Genesis mission and funding for Aptronic, and you use the other hand to shield that nascent industry from foreign competition, using Section 232 tariffs.
A shield.
Exactly. Look at the semiconductor action that just went into effect on January 15th of this year.
Right. A new 25% tariff on imported semiconductors.
And, crucially, on derivative products. That means it also applies to things that are made with those chips. But, and here's where it gets really interesting and you see the messy reality of global supply chains, there are exemptions.
I saw that. So it's not a blanket ban. There are loopholes.
There is always a loophole in trade policy. In this case, if the imported chips are going to be used for U.S. data centers or for U.S.-based research or by U.S. startups, they can be exempt from the tariff.
So if you're a massive U.S. cloud provider, you basically get a pass. But if you're a foreign company trying to sell a finished product here, you get hit.
That's the idea. It's a classic carrot and stick approach. They want to force chip manufacturing to move inside the U.S., but they don't want to completely cripple the U.S. tech giants who still rely heavily on foreign supply chains in the short term. It's a very, very delicate balancing act.
You want to hurt your competition without shooting yourself in the foot.
You're threading a needle while riding a unicycle, as you said. It's incredibly complex.
But what about the most basic level of the supply chain? You can't build a robot or a chip without the raw materials, the critical minerals.
And that is the Achilles heel of this whole strategy. The administration just concluded a major Section 232 investigation into critical minerals. The findings were blunt and, frankly, alarming.
What did they find?
That the U.S. is dangerously dependent on foreign supply for dozens of key minerals. And when the report says foreign supply, the subtext is almost always China.
So what's the plan for that? We can't just slap a tariff on rocks that we don't have on the ground here.
Yeah.
If we don't have the mines, a tariff just raises our own costs and makes us less competitive.
Exactly. A tariff doesn't magically create a lithium mine. So the strategy here is diversification, or else. The administration is aggressively negotiating new trade agreements to secure these minerals from friendly nations, Australia, Canada, parts of South America, and Africa.
But what's the or else?
The threat is still there. If they can't get favorable deals, they are threatening to impose tariffs or minimum import prices to artificially prop up any fledgling domestic mining operations. The U.S. Geological Survey even released a World Minerals Outlook that forecasts global production capacity through 2029. They are literally mapping the Earth to identify and mitigate our geopolitical vulnerabilities rock by rock.
It really is sovereignty all the way down to the dirt.
It truly is.
But this new trade aggression isn't just directed at adversaries like China. I stumbled across a story in our stack about a dispute with Canada. And honestly, it's a bit bizarre. It's about private jets.
Yes, the Canadian jet dispute. This
Yeah.
is a perfect, almost absurd example of how granular and aggressive this new trade policy has become.
So break it down for us. What happened? Why are we picking a trade fight with Canada over Gulfstream jets?
Essentially, the president threatened a 50% tariff on Canadian-assembled aircraft. And it was very specifically targeting Gulfstream jets that have a major manufacturing presence there.
50%. That would almost double the price of a jet. Why on earth would they do that?
Because the Canadian aviation authorities had delayed certifying those jets due to what they call fuel icing system tests. They had a regulatory safety concern. They wanted to run more tests to make sure the fuel wouldn't freeze at high altitude.
That seems, I don't know, pretty reasonable, like a good thing for regulators to be checking.
In a normal world, yes, it would be a routine regulatory process. But in the world of the Great Divergence, the White House viewed that regulatory delay not as a safety measure, but as an illegal trade barrier.
They saw it as Canada deliberately hindering an American company's sales.
Exactly. And so the response was to threaten a massive punitive tariff. It was pure retaliation.
That is just wild. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. What was the outcome?
In the end, the Canadians expedited their review and the tariff threat was withdrawn. But the incident sent a shockwave through the diplomatic community. It shows that no industry, no matter how niche, is safe from being leveraged in these disputes. And it shows that even our closest allies, like Canada, are not immune if their domestic regulations are seen as slowing down American commerce. It's weaponized regulation.
It really reinforces that central theme. It's not just East versus West anymore. It's America first versus everyone else's rules and regulations.
And that friction creates an incredibly volatile and unpredictable environment for any corporation that operates globally.
Speaking of corporations, let's move to Section 4, the corporate battlefield. Because amidst all this government action, the private sector is making some absolutely massive moves, especially in the realm of security.
Security has become the bedrock of this entire new economy. If you have autonomous robots walking around your factories and AI models inventing new materials, you have to be able to secure them. And the single biggest trend right now is identity security.
Identity. So basically, knowing who is who or what is what.
Exactly. With the explosion of AI agents, both software bots running in the cloud and physical robots on the ground, the simple question of who is accessing this data becomes incredibly complex. Is it a human employee? Is it an authorized AI agent? Is it a malicious bot? Is it a deep fake of your CFO?
I saw a statistic in the documents. 82% of all data breaches now involve a compromised identity.
That's the number one vulnerability. The old model of cybersecurity was building a strong wall around your castle. But that doesn't work anymore. Hackers don't break in anymore. They log in. They steal credentials.
And that's why we're seeing these huge funding rounds for startups in this space.
Exactly. Startups like Conductor One, which raised $79 million, and Savient, which just raised $700 million, they are building what they call AI-native identity platforms. They're not just securing humans, they're creating and managing identities for thousands of AI agents.
And there was one startup that sounded like it was straight out of a spy novel, Imper.ai.
Yes, Imper.ai was founded by veterans of Unit 8200, that's the elite Israeli intelligence and cyber warfare unit. They are building technology specifically to stop real-time deepfake impersonation on platforms like Zoom and Teams.
That is both terrifying and incredibly necessary. The idea that I could be on a video call with you right now, and it's not actually you, but a real-time deepfake trying to get me to authorize a wire transfer.
It's already happening. It's a massive new threat vector, and companies are willing to pay a huge premium to stop it. This isn't about firewalls anymore. It's about verifying the fabric of reality in real time.
And the big tech giants are clearly seeing this threat too. Google just made a massive move in this space.
The biggest in their entire history. Google just completed its acquisition of the cybersecurity firm Wiz for $32 billion.
$32 billion. That is just a staggering number.
It is, but what's almost as interesting as the price tag is the regulatory reaction to it, or rather the lack of one. The European Union, which is usually the toughest antitrust regulator in the world, approved the deal unconditionally.
Really? The EU loves to block or put heavy conditions on big tech mergers. They're the global antitrust watchdogs.
They absolutely are. But in this case, their official statement said the deal didn't raise significant competition concerns. I think the subtext there is that regulators are starting to realize that we need massive, consolidated security infrastructure to handle the scale of the AI threat.
So they're basically saying that the threat from state-sponsored hackers and AI-driven attacks is bigger than the threat of a tech monopoly in this one area.
That seems to be the calculation. In this new climate, national security seems to be trumping antitrust concerns. And we see that same logic playing out in the defense tech boom as well. Just look at Anduril Industries.
Anduril, famously named after the magical sword in Lord of the Rings, a company that definitely knows how to brand itself.
A very fitting name. They are now valued at $30.5 billion. That is up 118% in just the last 10 months.
That is just explosive, exponential growth.
It reflects a profound cultural change in Silicon Valley. If you go back to 2016, working on defense technology was taboo. You had employees walking out of Google over their involvement in Project Maven, the military AI project.
I remember that. It was a huge controversy.
It was, but now, defense tech is arguably the hottest sector in venture capital.
So what changed? Is it just the money?
It's the money, for sure, but it's also the geopolitical reality checks. The war in Ukraine, the ongoing tensions over Taiwan, these conflicts have demonstrated that autonomous systems, drones, AI-powered surveillance, networked command and control are decisive on the modern battlefield. And Dural has positioned itself as the arsenal of democracy for the 21st century.
So they are building the very tools that the Section 232 tariffs are designed to protect.
It all connects. The tariffs protect the domestic industry. The industry builds the advanced defense tech. The defense tech is then used to secure the nation's sovereignty. It's a self-reinforcing loop.
So with all that as a backdrop, let's look at the market more broadly. Let's move to Section 5, Startup Trends and Market Movements. If I'm a listener and I'm trying to figure out where the puck is going, where is the money actually flowing in 2026?
There is a very clear trend emerging that venture capitalists are talking about constantly, the battle between horizontal versus vertical AI.
Okay, can you explain that distinction?
Sure. Horizontal AI is a general-purpose tool. Think of ChatGPT or Claude. It's a broad platform that can do a little bit of everything. It writes poems, it codes, it summarizes your emails. It's a horizontal slice across all industries.
The jack of all trades.
Exactly. Vertical AI, on the other hand, is a tool that is purpose-built for one specific industry or task. An AI for legal contract analysis, an AI for medical diagnostics, an AI for cybersecurity threat detection.
So broadly capable versus highly specialized.
Right. And here's the key insight from the market data. While about 60% of the corporate spending is still going towards those big horizontal tools, the actual value, the profit, the customer loyalty, the stickiness is all accruing in the vertical tools.
Why is that?
Because they solve specific, expensive business problem. If you buy a general chatbot for your company, that's nice. It might improve productivity a little bit. But if you buy a vertical AI tool that automates 90% of your legal discovery process or stops your company from getting hit with a multi-million-dollar ransomware attack, that's not nice to have. That is essential.
It's a tool, not a toy.
That's it. Look at startups like Zero Networks, which does something called microsegmentation for network security, or Reflectus, which manages a company's web exposure. These aren't trying to write poetry. They are trying to stop you from losing millions of dollars. That's where the smart money is moving.
And what about geography? A few years ago, the narrative was all about the tech exodus from California. Everyone was moving to Miami and Austin. Has that trend continued?
Actually, the latest data shows a significant reversal of that trend. The exodus narrative is effectively dead. San Francisco has reemerged as the undeniable, undisputed epicenter of the AI boom in 2026.
So the Bay Area is back.
It never really left, but the sheer talent density required for these massive AI projects, you need the chip designers, the model trainers, the robotics engineers, the security experts, the investors. You need all of them in the same room, breathing the same air.
The agglomeration effect.
Exactly. The Genesis mission, the big security startups, the robotics labs, they are all clustering in San Francisco. The gravity is just too strong to resist.
And looking at the public markets, let's start with the king, NVIDIA.
Still the king, and the kingdom is expanding. Revenue is expected to hit $65.5 billion for the quarter. And their total AI product revenue is now projected to exceed $500 billion by the end of 2026.
$500 billion just in AI revenue. That number is so big, it's hard to even wrap your head around that scale.
It is truly mind-boggling. It's the fastest value creation event in corporate history. But analysts are starting to wave some yellow flags elsewhere in the market. Take a look at Palantir.
Palantir, the big data and defense analytics company.
Right. The stock has surged an incredible 2,000% since 2023.
2,000%. It sounds like a crypto coin from 2021, not a major defense contractor.
Yes. And that's the concern. It's currently trading at a price-to-earnings ratio of over 200. Now, compare that to other high-growth tech stocks like Uber or Intuitive Surgical. Palantir looks incredibly expensive, even for a company with great technology.
So there's a worry that the AI hype is inflating some valuations beyond their underlying fundamentals.
There's a definite worry. The underlying trend is real, the technology is real, but the prices for some of these assets might be getting a little frothy.
So the classic advice, proceed with caution.
As always. The market can remain irrational a lot longer than you can remain solvent.
So bringing this all together as we wrap up, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We're looking at a world where the U.S. government is actively hand-holding AI development through the Genesis mission. We have humanoid robots like Apollo walking into Mercedes factories to build cars. And we have a global trade war being fought over the tiny chips that power both of them.
If I had to summarize this entire deep dive in one single word, the theme of 2026 is sovereignty. We are seeing the rise of sovereign AI, sovereign mineral supply chains, sovereign data, the era of open, borderless technological growth. where a startup in Berlin could compete seamlessly with one in San Francisco or Beijing, that era is fading fast.
It's being replaced by what?
By nationalized, fortified tech ecosystems. It's a fortress world.
And inside those fortresses?
Inside those fortresses, the technology is moving faster than ever before because now it has the full, unconditional backing of the state.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. We always like to leave you with something to chew on, something to maybe keep you up at night, in a good way, or maybe a bad way.
We talked earlier about the Genesis mission and its goal of removing ideological bias from AI to make it objective. And that sounds wonderful on paper. But in a world where these AI models are going to determine scientific funding, where they decide which research avenues are efficient or promising and which are not, who actually gets to define what objective means?
That's the terrifying question. An algorithm will always optimize for whatever you tell it to optimize for.
Yeah.
If objective is defined as pure, short-term economic return, what happens to all the vital basic science that benefits society but doesn't immediately make a profit? Does that research just wither away?
Exactly. And let's connect that directly to the robots. We talked about Apollo potentially entering the workforce for $80,000, less than the fully loaded cost of a human employee over 2 years. That represents a massive efficiency gain for the economy as a whole. But are we, as a society, prepared for the economic great divergence to happen not just between nations, but between the people who own the robots and the people who have to compete with them for a job?
That is the question that might define the next decade, or even the next century. If the robot does the job better and cheaper, who reaps the rewards of that productivity gain? The great divergence might not be something happening overseas. It might be happening right here at home, between neighbors.
It's a divergence that we all need to be ready for.
Well, on that cheery note, thank you for walking us through the future, which I guess is now just the present.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.